The Sacred Mushroom Code, what Amanita Muscaria reveals about ancient religion. There is an icon that crossed centuries as if it were immortal. A red cap speckled with white. You saw it before you knew its name. You recognized it before you understood why. And here's the question that opens the door. Why did a specific mushroom become a universal symbol, as if it had always been hovering near the sacred? Today, I'm going to show you a dangerous hypothesis, that Amanita Muscaria wasn't just a piece of nature. It may have been a code, a hidden signature, and at some point, a secret too big to be spoken out loud. But before anything else, this is not an invitation, not guidance, not romanticizing. This organism can cause serious poisoning, and when the sacred becomes a trend, people get hurt. If you stay until the end, you'll never look at religion, initiation, or the sacred the same way again. So this won't be the last time we meet, and so you don't close this door on your own awakening, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and keep this gateway open. And if you want to go deeper, go back to the very first episode. These videos work like a TV series. Each one connects to the next, and each one takes you further than the last. Now breathe, because if you keep going, you'll understand why certain institutions would rather you worship symbols instead of crossing portals. Here's the first shock. Amanita Muscaria is not a spiritual toy. It's beautiful, and it's dangerous. It can alter perception, confuse, drop you, unravel you. In severe cases, it can lead to agitation and stupor and real medical risk. And that's exactly what makes the symbol so powerful. Anything that can shift the mind can shift power. Now, hold on to this. If something can produce visions, revelations, and symbolic death, that feeling that the old self broke and a new self was born, then it can easily become raw material for religion. And this is where the conflict begins. Direct experience versus institutional authority. Experience doesn't ask permission. Authority demands control. And if an ancient group discovered a shortcut to ecstatic states, what happens when the world starts hunting, banning, and demonizing that shortcut? Does it disappear? No, it hides. And the best hiding place in the world is where no one thinks to look, inside sacred stories. Now I'm going to take you to a landscape that doesn't look religious, but is. Cold forests, northern peoples, ancient rites, long before cathedrals and pulpits. There are records of shamanic traditions in the far north of Eurasia, where this mushroom appears connected to trance, vision, and mediation with the unseen. And why does that matter? Because it places Amanita Muscaria exactly where religions are born, in initiation. Initiation isn't believing. Initiation is crossing fear, crossing pain, crossing the old self, and returning different. That's why every real initiation has the same core. You enter as someone, you leave as someone else. And here comes the first major clue. If Amanita was, in certain contexts, a key to these states, again, in some cultural and historical contexts, then it becomes the kind of secret no one wants ordinary people to master. Because if people learn to cross without temples, the temple loses its monopoly on the sky. And when that monopoly is threatened, camouflage begins. Look at it as a symbol, not as food. Red, warning, blood, power, life. White, spots, snow, ash, residue, marks. It looks crowned, it looks stamped. It looks like something not normal. It's the kind of image the human unconscious turns into myth instantly. And myth does that because myth doesn't need chemistry. Myth needs an image. So even when a secret is removed from practice, it can survive as an icon. And once it becomes an icon, it begins to seep into paintings, ornaments, folk tales, innocent symbols. Now hold on to this question because it will return at the end. If this icon survived for so long, why did it survive? By accident, or because it carries a message no one managed to erase? Every secret that grants power has to choose. Either it is told to the world and becomes a target, or it is disguised and crosses history. And the most effective disguise is not a vault, it's a narrative. Because narrative has two layers. The public layer, morality, rules, obedience, be good. The private layer, symbol, key, portal, cross. The public layer keeps crowds aligned. The private layer transforms initiates. And once you understand that, you begin to see why religions repeat certain words obsessively. Mystery kingdom, key door, light, new birth, body, blood, rebirth. It sounds like poetry, but it also sounds like a manual, written in a way only some people recognize. Now the forbidden question: what if Amanita Muscaria, or its archetype, was one of the alphabets of that code? Not as final proof, but as a clue to a form of religion older than institutional religion. Religion as experience. And that takes us to the universal pattern. You think death and resurrection belongs to one religion, but the pattern is older than any institution. It's in the seed, in winter and spring, in harvest, in the body that sleeps and wakes, and it's in initiation. Every initiate passes through symbolic death. The old self is lost, the old skin is shed, the old name dies, and then they return with a new light. Now think coldly. Why do distant cultures repeat the same script? Because the script describes something deeply human. And if certain cultures found shortcuts to induce that script, through rhythm, chanting, deprivation, plants, mushrooms, ritual, then religion begins as technology of the spirit. But technology of the spirit is dangerous to empires, because empires prefer predictable subjects, and ecstasy makes human beings unpredictable. So what does power do? It doesn't destroy ecstasy. It turns it into crime, heresy, sin, and then it sells a safe version of the portal, a ritual with no access, a symbol with no crossing. And here comes the part that delivers the reality shock, the seizure of the sacred. Watch the mechanism. If there is an initiatory secret, power has two options: persecute it until it vanishes, absorb it, and control it. The second is smarter. You keep the symbols, you keep the words, you keep the aesthetic, but you change the purpose. Mystery stops being experience and becomes doctrine. Light stops being lived and becomes promise. Door stops being inside you and becomes an external place controlled by leaders. And once that happens, religion becomes an emotional machine. It knows how to use fear, guilt, reward, group identity, salvation. And all of that serves one final goal: make you dependent. Now, where does Amanita enter? It enters as the perfect metaphor for what was forbidden, a natural access to the strange, the numinous, the unseen. And when access is forbidden, the institution offers a substitute, a rite that imitates the portal, but does not deliver the portal. And the most revealing rite is the feast. Why does the religious world love the idea of eating the sacred? Because it communicates the most dangerous message of all. The divine enters you. That destroys intermediaries. That makes the body a temple. That makes experience compete with authority. Now here is the hypothesis you must hold as hypothesis. At some point, certain rites may have been inspired by real ecstatic experiences, sometimes induced by cultural techniques, sometimes tied to natural substances in specific contexts, and then reinterpreted, domesticated, institutionalized. What remains? The language of incorporation. What changes? The core. And when the core changes, religion becomes theater. And theater, repeated for centuries, becomes truth. Now you see why the mushroom must sit at the center of your story, because it symbolizes the forbidden core, initiation, the return to the portal. And this is where many people lose their footing, because they realize they may have worshipped the map instead of the crossing. Now I'll be precise. There are two possible readings, and both are dangerous in different ways. Reading 1, historical and localized. Amanita appears in a documentable way in certain traditions and regions. That does not mean all religions. It means there are real lines in human history where this mushroom was linked to trance. Reading 2, symbolic and universal. Even where there is no direct use, the image of the mushroom may have become an archetype of the portal, the red cap, the crown of the strange, the forest seal, the emblem of something forbidden. And guess which reading is more explosive for institutions? Both, because one threatens the monopoly through practice, and the other threatens the monopoly through interpretation. If you admit that religion may have roots in initiations and altered states, you open a door that power hates, the idea that the sacred does not depend on permission. And then the question changes. It's no longer which religion is true. It becomes who controls access to what you call God. And here comes the final strike, in the present. Today, the modern world does something even more perverse. It turns ancient symbols into commodities. It takes mystery and sells it in colorful packaging. It takes the sacred and turns it into a trend. And when that happens, two bad things are born at the same time. People get poisoned chasing shortcuts without context and without respect for danger. Institutions point to the chaos and say, "See, that's why you must never touch this." In other words, the market trivializes, power demonizes, and the individual gets lost. And true initiatory knowledge, knowledge that demands discipline, preparation, ethics, responsibility, remains hidden. Because real initiation is not consumption. Real initiation is transformation. And transformation demands a price, the courage to destroy your own certainties. Now listen, this is the deeper fraud. It isn't, they invented everything from nothing. It's colder than that. It's this, they turned experience into obedience. They turned a portal into a promise. They turned the divine into property. And Amanita Muscaria, as symbol, sits at the center as a silent reminder. The forest had keys before the temple existed. If you understood what I showed, then you saw that Amanita Muscaria is more than a mushroom. It is a mirror. It asks, do you want a religion that gives you answers, or a crossing that breaks you and remakes you? Because that's what initiation does. It doesn't comfort you, it breaks you, and that's why institutions prefer to hand you ready-made belief. Ready-made belief keeps you predictable. Initiation makes you dangerous to any system. And now comes the last question, the only one that matters. What do you defend with rage without ever investigating? If this video hit you, comment one word, Amanita.
I will reveal the forbidden wisdom.